Bem-vindos a mais um episódio do Don't Panic, It's Organic. E na nossa playlist Hanging with the Pros. E nessa semana, a entrevistada é uma especialista em marketing de conteúdo, em social media. Vocês devem estar se perguntando o que tudo isso tem a ver com SEO. E ela vai trazer essa experiência dela em SEO para a nossa conversa. Ela já teve uma agência de marketing na Califórnia, Madhouse Marketing. Hoje ela é VP de Operações na Top Hat Rank. E também já trabalhou na SEMrush, a nossa ferramenta querida aqui do Brasil, né? Bem popular. Ela tem um curso lá também. Com vocês, Ashley Segura. Ashley, thank you very much for finally beating the agendas to be able to have this chat. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we were able to make things work out.
Yeah, well, it's crazy times, isn't it? So,
yeah.
So, Ashley, please, for the Brazilian SEO community, who is Ashley Segura? Please introduce yourself. Tell us about your experience and how you got to be this incredible professional in the industry.
Certainly, and thank you. I actually got started in journalism. My background was journalism. And then I started to do social media, building websites, creating blog content for my insurance agent. And then I started speaking and started to get invited to speak at different events. And so then that's when I really made the switch from a journalistic career to a marketing career. And so I started working at different agencies. I worked in-house as a marketing director, and then eventually started opening up my own agencies. And so I'm on my fourth and largest agency now, Top Hat Social and Top Hat Content, which are social and content marketing divisions. And so it's been a pretty wild ride. Definitely leaned a little bit more towards the social and content side of things with marketing, just because of my journalistic background, crafting a story, telling a brand story, and doing it in a way to where a user is always going to be engaged that was 101 for me, because that's all journalism is sharing a specific story and getting it to the right audience. So to do that in the online world, I found a great way to still channel all of that is through social media and content marketing. And that's what I've been doing for the past, 10 years now, since 2011. Yeah, 10 years now.
Oh, that's a very long time in content. How was it back then? Like, how much has that changed since you started? Like, was producing content 10 years ago the same as it is today? Or you find that there's a certain evolution in there or not?
There's a huge evolution. And it's so great that you use the word evolution, because I was going to come at this really negatively. It used to be so much easier. Creating content used to be so much easier. Like writing blog posts was more of just, they were simplified. And then it was long form content. Like it felt like there was really strict rules to follow with content, and the users just accepted what was published, and they didn't have 50 million choices. They were pretty loyal to the sites that they went to, and they stuck to their choices, and they digested content in a very similar way across the board. Now we have people are on their phones, people are on their tablets, people are on their computers, people are on their laptops, versus desktop is even a different experience when you have your laptop at a coffee shop versus your at-home desktop. And so people are digesting content completely different than they did 10 years ago, which means the type of content that we as marketers and brands have to create has to mimic that. So there's arguments that long form content is completely thrown out the window now because everybody's in a hurry. They just need the direct information. That's not the case. And I think a big reason that like those kinds of statements come out to play is because content used to be like that. Content used to be very black and white. We used to be able to just have a set rule and stick with that. And then there would be a minor change, and it would usually be like an algorithm change. It was like, okay, we just can't do this anymore. Now we can do this instead. Now there's a huge playing field. One brand long form content is going to work great. They're going to have long engagement, consistent engagement. Whereas the complete opposite brand, if they did long form content, no one would read it. Everyone would jump right off their site. No one would engage with any of their content. So it's a big guessing game, but we do have a lot more data to help us through and to help us figure out how to make the right guesses now.
When you say it's a big guessing game, would you say that like for each industry, there's a different style that you need to work with? Like say for health, then tourism, how do you guys go by these guesses, or how do you establish what kind of content will work best for each segment? Because I get you guys at top hat rank, you have different segments. You guys are, I've seen that podcast or videos channel of SEO for publishers. Yeah. How do you go about this structuring these content strategies for different segments to annihilate the guessing game, let's say?
Well, there's a lot of data per industry. And to address your first question, per industry is 100% different. So if you're in the health industry, long form content is actually more likely going to work best for you, because if someone's looking up, hey, I'm having these symptoms, what could it be? They want to know everything about what it could potentially be. If you just give a paragraph, some bullets, another paragraph, and a little video, they're going to go to another site and read even more information because they need and are looking for more info to figure out, okay, what's going on with me, or is this normal, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas if you're, say you're an e-commerce brand and you just launched a new pair of shoes or new pair of pants, you don't need a lot of written form content to support that. That's where you want exciting content. You need video content. You need a lot of branded graphics that are supporting that. You need social ads to support that. On your site, you need to make sure there's a really clear journey of, okay, the new product is on the homepage. There's a product listing page with all the details about the product. There's an easy checkout process. So per industry, 100% different. The data that we have these days allow us to see the user behavior, and if they're going from that initial, okay, they see the banner on the homepage that there's a new shoe, are they going to the product page? And if they are, what interactions are they doing on that product page? And because we have that data, there is still a little bit of a guessing game of, okay, I think they bounced off because we didn't provide them the answers to X, Y, Z. So now we can go add that to the content. But there's also tools out there like heat mapping tools to where you can literally see where users are scrolling, where they stop scrolling, where maybe they're reading or they're trying to figure something out and then they're leaving. So with the amount of data that we have, it takes a lot of the guesswork out, but there still is an element, a human element to it. And I always recommend, if you look at the data and you see you have high traffic, which means a lot of people are going to a specific page, a specific piece of content, but you also have a high bounce rate. So they're immediately leading. There's a disconnect there. What you originally advertised to them in that first content, what you sold them on to get them to that page, you're not delivering on. So that's when I say you have to be human. The data's all there and it's incredibly helpful these days, but you also have to be human and actually physically check that and see for yourself, if I was going from A to B to C, what could I have missed on B, and why are people not getting to C, essentially?
Interesting that you mentioned about all this breadth of data that we have nowadays. Mm-hmm. But when you're creating your content strategy, how important is the personification of that audience? Do you still use the personas methodology to develop that and try to minimize this guessing game? Or are you guys just going through data and say, now we're crunching the data here and this is how we're going to work with content?
So for every content audit and content strategy that we do, the second portion of it, after all of the data is collected, is our persona analysis section. And so we'll create 2 to 3 different personas. We'll give them a picture of what this person looks like. We write what their habits are, what their shopping habits are, who they go to make decisions, And that could be a person, that could be a specific resource that they always go to before they actually pull the trigger on something. We come up with topics that this specific persona would be attracted to versus the other two or the other one persona. And we do that after the data, because once you have all of this data, it's like, okay, great. I can see I have people from this age range. I have more males than females in this location, and they're coming to my sites or to my content this many times. All that is very black and white and great. But then if you take that and match it with, well, these are the 3 types of personas that I have. Persona Lindsay is the one who's most likely going and actually converting. Whereas persona Alex needs much more help to convert. So I know I need to create more specific kinds of content to get Alex to convert. Lindsay may not engage with it, and that's fine because she's already going to convert. So persona analysis at Top Hat is still a huge part of auditing, going through your data, creating strategies. And I think it should be in every element of marketing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And we at Hedgehog, when we obviously we are more focused in SEO, but content marketing, it's one of our pillars. Every project we produce the content, we come up with strategies, we do the auditing and so on. And one thing that we are using a lot, we've created, not that we coined the term, it's been out there for a while now, the search personas, because we are finding that in order for your content to perform well, especially in search, obviously, you need to understand the intent behind that. How do you guys go by defining the intent behind each topic that when you come up with the strategy? And how does that influence the way you produce the content? Because we're not just talking about articles here. You guys also work on the transactional side of things, right? Like the copy of a service page of products. How do you guys are using search intent within your content strategies?
In a few different ways, but it really comes down to a lot of what's going on with all of the algorithms and everything the past couple of years is always satisfying the user, thinking of the user first. If you add in this sentence, is it beneficial for the user, or are you just doing it to keyword stuff or to try and improve your rankings? And so even when we're writing product descriptions, we're again using data to see how people are bouncing off, what pages people are bouncing off, and then adding in the human element to see, okay, this is the type of information that's needed there. That's a way to also satisfy search intent, because they're searching, whether you're the search persona like me, where I will search a specific keyword and I will literally go through all 10 of the results on the first page, versus searcher persona B, who will only go through the first 1 or 2 or 3. And if they don't find their answer, then they'll give up. And so knowing that, and there's plenty of tools to where like you can actually see this kind of data, you need to be able to, on one single page and with one single piece of content, make sure you're providing the information for all of the persona types. And so that's where we'll make sure we're answering the who, what, when, where, why, how questions within the content. And frankly, if it doesn't make sense, like if it's not relevant to have a how this service is made, that's more of like maybe product specific, then we won't include it just to include it to help with the algorithms and to help with the search engines, because that doesn't always benefit.
Interesting. You mentioned one thing that caught my attention. Normally when we talk about heat maps and eye trackings and, Hotjars, clarities and crazy eggs alike, we're normally using, and people tend to think about those when you're talking about conversion rate optimization. But if I'm not mistaken, you said you use them in your content as well.
Yeah.
What kind of things are you looking for? And some examples, obviously, said maybe, you got to the middle of this, everybody's coming to the middle of this article and are leaving. What kind of information can that provide to you in order to you to take action on that? So, do I need to add more content, images? How do you work with that? Because I'm curious now, because normally 90% of the time I'm using Hotjar or Clarity or whatever in transactional pages. I never thought about content. Share with us some insights around that, please, if you could.
Certainly. Yeah, no, it is definitely a game changer when it comes to using heat mapping tools for content. It helps kind of answer a little bit more of those guessing options. So for, let's say, we work with a lot of publishers. And so let's say it's a blog post about how to make a specific recipe. A lot of times people will search, what does the oven temperature need to be? Or if I'm cooking chicken, what does the internal temperature need to be? They just need a quick answer. So if they go to your piece of content, go to your recipe in a specific case, and they're scrolling down and they scroll fast just to get to the recipe card where it lists the very specific information, like what the oven temp or how long to cook this is going to be, then that tells you that you have a lot of users going there only for one thing. And that's just to get a direct answer, which is great. They landed on your page. But then if they leave, if they don't go to any other recipes, if they don't subscribe to your newsletter, then your content isn't serving its full purpose. And so then that's when it gives us a cue that, okay, great. We did satisfy the search intent, the user's intent of what they were looking for, but we didn't take them on a roller coaster around the brand. And so that's when I'll suggest right above the recipe card and right below the recipe card, adding internal links to relevant blog posts. So other content, other recipes that are similar. So if this is like a chicken recipe, then side dishes that would complement this recipe, or desserts that would complement this. Trying to find ways to keep the user not just engaged with that specific post. If they got what they're looking for that post and they don't want anything else, that's fine. But you want them to explore the rest of your website, whether that's look at your other products, go to your service pages. And so that's where we'll start to add content pieces of trying to connect them to the relevant pages that are already published.
As you were saying, I was thinking here, one of the biggest complaints we hear when we're talking about content, because as I said, we use content to support e-commerce and other industries. And one of the biggest complaints we get from clients is that, oh, we're producing all this content, but it's not converting. And it's because we never treated the content with a transactional approach. We never looked at it with a heat mapping tool. And am I correct in saying, like, if you want your content to convert, treat it with a transactional approach with the techniques that you just said. So very interesting insight here that we're sharing with the audience here, because I've talked with a lot of people and I never thought about that. Nobody talked about, like, let's use Hotjars, for instance, on content. It's so simple. It's like, it's there, isn't it? It's one of those things it's right on your face and you don't act upon. So guys, if you want your content to convert, treat it transactionally, let's say it. Maybe not the right wording.
If you have, say you're trying to test out if long form or short form content is right for you, which, just a sidebar, not every topic is going to be the same. Some topics short is going to be better. Some topics long is going to be better. So sometimes it's not always about the brand. But if you use a heat mapping tool like this, you're going to be able to see, okay, they got 3/4 of the way through and they left. Usually it's not because they got the information that they wanted. Usually if they got the info that they wanted, they're going to get it right away. So you'll see them scrolling fast and they're trying to just find the specific answer that they're looking for. But if they got through like 60, 70% of the content, even watching a video, not just text, even watching a video, they got through that far and then they left, something happened where your content is no longer engaging. The piece of content, it wasn't written well enough. It didn't provide all of the information that needed to be there. If this is a video, your video starts to get stale. This is where you'll know, and this is a big cue, okay, these kinds of topics, or if I'm doing video versus text, I need to shorten it by 30 seconds because I'm losing the audience. I'm keeping them on too long. And the same goes with blog posts. That's when you know, okay, I need to shorten this blog post because I'm just not keeping the attention of the reader.
Yeah, and this is another very good insight, because a lot of people tend to kind of like just go by these ranking factors studies, like that you need 1,800 words to rank first in Google, which it's a lot of balls, isn't it? It's just like, it's not that, guys. This is how you rank in Google. This is how you get your content testing, aiming at your audience. So that said, we have, I know it's not a ranking factor, but over the past few years, that those three little letters, kind of like every time you talk about content, you cannot talk without talking about EAT.
Yeah.
That changed because all these years, is a very recent thing, I would say 3 or 4 years back, that really got the very importance of the EAT, a lot of people talking about it.
Yeah.
Did that change the way you guys work with content? And do you follow any kind of like, say, best practices checklist to address some of the EAT guidelines, let's say it, or not?
Yes. Yeah, no, 100%. And I was actually just rereading the article from Google the other day because I was trying to reference, one of our clients had a question about how to format a specific piece of content and if short paragraphs or longer paragraphs. And so I was referencing that. Those guidelines are still relevant today, whether or not search engines are still using that as a huge ranking factor. The point behind it is the quality of the content, and the quality of the content, even from the beginning, even when content marketing was easy compared to what it is now, that's always been the utmost of importance. Are you addressing everything there is to know on that specific topic? Are you authoritative enough to be able to even talk about that product? Do you have any clout? Do you have the backlinks? Do you have the shares to support you to be able to talk about this? And if you don't, then I wouldn't expect you, and I wouldn't be surprised if you don't rank highly for that piece of content on that specific topic. That's not to say you can't, but it's more so to say don't put all of your eggs in that basket, because the baseline of that is you being authoritative and you providing all the information there is to know about the topic. And that's where I'll dive into SEMrush's topic research tool. I'll type in the keyword, I'll type in the topic, I'll choose the not the demographic, the location, whether you want it state, country, worldwide, whatnot. And it'll populate all of the most popular and the most commonly asked questions, the who, what, when, where, why, how questions about this. So if you want to be authoritative on this, if you want to produce a piece of content that goes in depth, that covers everything there is to know so that you have a better chance of ranking, go inside the topic research tool. All of these questions that people are actually typing into Google and search engines and asking, those can become your headings. Those are what you can address throughout the entire piece.
I love that. And topic research from SEMrush is one of my favorite. One tool that's been out for a while now, over the few weeks, is Also Asked. I love that one. AlsoAsked.com, because it just brings from the people Also Ask box, which is Google telling us what doubts people have around that topic. I find we're doing a lot of this reverse engineering. Sounds like very complicated now, but it's just looking at the SERPs. What the SERPs tells us is Google is telling you what people want. If you see people Also Ask box, if you see images, if you see videos, it's there. It's not rocket science, is it? It's just like understanding the SERP and delivering that. But I find it as well, like, some people tend to think that sometimes the basics are not done. We worked with, right when the medic update came up, this very famous doctor here in Brazil, she's on TV and so on, like main networks here. She had a domain with her name. She produces a lot of content. She has books. She even has a Wikipedia page on her name. So that's how notorious she is. And during the 2018 medic update, boom, August, traffic from 400,000 visits to 10,000. And then she hired us and she said, I don't know what's going on with my content, this, that, and the other. And I said, look, it's super simple. Google can tell that you are who you are. No articles were written or signed by her. There was no link between her domain and her Wikipedia page. So Google couldn't figure out who she was. And then that's why she lost all the authority around that. So that was one of the cases that showed me that this EAT thing does really has its influence, and how important having the authors on the page, because she, like on the blog, on her website, lots of content. She's like a pediatric, like for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's very, very famous on TV every morning. And all of a sudden came the magic update. She lost everything. And it was right there. And sometimes the basics are not done correctly. And we find that a lot. I say big brands, but I'm the biggest brand. I say, but hang on, Google doesn't know that. You need the technicalities in there to give the right signals, right?
And they'll do their best to try and connect the dots. But if you don't make it easy by, like you said, doing the basics, they're not going to. And like you said, with the SERPs, just looking at the SERPs too, when you're trying to be more authoritative and when you're trying to add all the information, I think a lot of people and a lot of brands in general get really overwhelmed when it comes to content and when it comes to satisfying both the algorithms and the search engines, all the algorithm updates, and the users, by feeling like they need to create all of this content. And that's not the case. Like just a 2 or 3 great evergreen articles or pieces of content can skyrocket your website and get you all the traffic that you need. It's not that you need to publish every single day. It's focus on a few really great core pieces of content, and then everything else can support that. But those pieces of content can help establish you with all the EAT, with the authoritativeness, with providing all the information, and kind of giving you that little pedestal that you need. And then you can focus on, all right, now I can work on all these other topics and producing all these other pieces of content.
It's just like links, isn't it? Sometimes you see agencies going like, oh, we need 10, 20 links. Or clients come to us and say, I want 20 links of DR whatever, 50. I said, hang on, first things first, I don't work with that metric, AS, authority score, DA, but we're going to focus on relevancy and so on. And sometimes one link, I know it's a cliche in the industry, but makes a huge difference. It can skyrocket your website.
Yes.
You're putting all that effort to get 10 links a month, while if you did work to get one in a highly authoritative news portal, or even we're finding that the relevancy is it has more weight than ever. So like say an industry blog, it's better than a news portal sometimes, depending on the industry that you are in. Because if Google understood that that's a very important entity in that industry, it's better to say have a link on a football boots specialized website blog, if you're talking about football, than on the BBC, for instance. And it skyrockets. It's I think what you said is very important. Sometimes people say, oh, I want 20 articles. I had a client, a fintech, that came to us and they said, I want 60 articles a month. I said, 60 articles? A month to talk about finance. I said, oh no. 1 month I'm gonna and no, I want. I said, look, I'm might be doing a disservice here. I said, let's which is still a lot. No, I want 60. I said, okay, I'm gonna do 60. I said, you want me to get your money? I'll do it. Yeah, fine. But you just don't have enough topics to talk about. What we end up doing 1 year later, pruning, reducing the number of content, because it's not just about volume, is it? As you said, 2 or 3 pieces of content can make a big difference for
a huge difference.
Yeah.
And if you have that, like if you have that great backlink, like you mentioned, you can't just stop there. So say you get an amazing backlink from a really authoritative website, not DA authority, but because it's a really great high traffic website, then you can't just say, okay, I got this. I can throw in the towel. I don't need to produce any more content. To me, that's when you need to start producing even more content about this topic, because you just got the authoritative bonus points right there. So now the more content that you produce about that topic, your chances of ranking that content are great because of that one backlink. And the chances of you getting even more backlinks from other authoritative sites is even higher now, because now you have this one pedestal backlink for this one pedestal piece of content. If you start to develop more content similar to that, you're going to gain even more.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think another cliche, but less is more. Isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. And I think that's so important. And that goes back to like the very first question that you asked, like, how has content changed? Back then, I feel like you needed to have those 60 blog posts a month, knowing that, you know, not everybody was going to read them, but to build your site out, to build the amount of content that you have, and to do all of the lovely tactics. Like, you needed all of this content. Now, less is so much more. If it's going to take you a month to produce and publish that video, and even at home producing, not like at a set, but if it's going to take you a month to produce that one piece of content, take the month, do it, instead of doing 60 in 1 month that all 60 are probably not going to get you a thing.
Couldn't agree with you more. Talking about less is more, we are seeing that Google is ever so lowering the amount of clicks that it drives to websites, the infamous 0 clicks searches. How is that affecting your strategies, and how are you working around that? Tough one.
It definitely hurts. It hurts the data. And so if you rely strictly on data, and if there isn't a human element on there, then it can be very confusing on what's working and what's not working. One thing to help combat that is social shares. So any content that's produced needs to be going on social. I can't think of one single brand or industry that doesn't have a place on at least one social media outlet. Doesn't mean it needs to be on Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok and the whole works, but maybe LinkedIn is the only place that it needs to live. Well, you can check to see what that engagement's doing, what the clicks are going through there, to kind of gauge, am I on the right track with this content? Am I, even if I'm getting conflicting data, am I at least on the right track? So looking at the social metrics is kind of like a backup. That doesn't work for every brand though, because some brands are brand new to having a social presence, so they're not going to get engagement. They're not going to have a lot of data to back up. But that's at least one method that we use to go through and kind of compare the data and see, are we really getting clicks, or is the article terrible, or what's going on here?
That said, are you guys to certain industry? You mentioned about recipes, guessing that you might have some client in that industry. We work with a big dieting company here in Brazil, which is the Weight Watchers branch,
Okay.
which is the peso. So we do the SEO for Weight Watchers here in Brazil. And awesome. Some of the traffic, usually one of the most visited pages, were the recipes. And now we're seeing that, you know, one of the biggest 0 click searches are related to recipes. We started to kind of like bring in other metrics to the board, like impressions. Do you think that is a valid way to kind of like, you know, you're seeing, because media guys also show that off. Why not SEOs as well?
Yeah.
Is that, would you say that could be a workaround? No, we want the traffic, obviously, but
certainly.
Do you think that is also pushing us to bring other metrics to the reports?
Definitely. I mean, that's where time on page is really important. And I usually say time on page is it's a tricky metric, because I can have a page pulled up, like I have a report pulled up on my left screen, and I'm here with you on my right screen. And so how conflicting is my actual time on page? But when you're running out of metrics, and you can only pick and choose so many metrics, looking at time on page and looking at bounce rate is really helpful when determining if a post or a piece of content is working or not. Also looking at where do they go from there? So what's the next URL that they go to? If they're still staying on the page, and if they're bouncing from recipe to recipe to recipe, then there's still a level of success there. But if they're getting to that page and then bouncing right off, there's a load time on page, they're not going to any other URLs, then that's a pretty good indicator that that piece of content isn't performing as it should.
Interesting. Yeah, it's all about the data, isn't it? It's all
It
about
is. It is, and we're lucky we have it.
Yeah, true. Actually, I think we could talk here for hours, but we're coming up to the end of our chat here. I have a few final questions to ask, like more advice to our Brazilian SEO community, content community, which is very big. We had the pleasure. I think the first time I met you was in Finland, right? That summer jam.
Yes. Yes.
Were you still working at SEMrush then?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. I remember. Then I think Brighton SEO. That was when you were leaving SEMrush, right? Or
yeah,
no?
That was one of the last conferences that I did with SEMrush. Yeah.
Yeah. And then at that event you met not Brighton but Finland. You met Victor from Rock Content.
Yep.
And these guys did an amazing job here in Brazil with the content marketing industry. They're kind of like huge, and there's a massive community here. So two things for us to wrap it up here. First, you guys are doing a very interesting can I call it podcast or video series? The SEO for publishers at Top Hat.
Oh yes, yeah. It's a webinar series.
Talk to us about a little bit about that, and so we can invite people to watch it. I receive that newsletter every day, so yeah, or every week or every other week when you guys do it. What's it all about? It's a very interesting content, but share with the community about that, please.
Definitely. So we have, it's a panel style. There's 4 of us, and I'm usually the host. I got to be a panelist once, but it's with Arsen Rabinovich. He's the owner of Top Hat Rank, Casey Marquis, and Andrew Wilder. And we basically focus on a specific topic that has to do with publisher optimization. And the publishers, I mean, that could be lifestyle bloggers, fitness bloggers, PR companies, journalism companies, news websites, pretty much anything that's producing content, any brand that's producing content at some large scale, like a blogger who that's their main form of income for their site is producing content and getting ad revenue, things like that. We focus on tips to help them. And so once a month, we focus on a new topic, and that's where we'll either go into an update just happened and we'll cover that, or we'll go over things that all 3 of us go through and work with publishers a lot. So any kinds of things that we see, that patterns that we find publishers do. We just did one on content this month, June 16th, in just a week and a half, we're going to be doing our annual episode. So it'll be our first year of doing episodes. And so we're going to go through and highlight the most commonly asked questions. Because when you register, you get the opportunity to ask a question, and that's how we create the questions for each episode. So I can definitely send you over the details for that, but I highly recommend, if you would like to know more about how to optimize your content or optimize your site for a publisher site, to look, you can go to tophatrank.com and there's a publisher section.
Okay, I'll definitely share that in the comments below. And to wrap things up, Ashley, for those professionals that are starting to work or want to gain more experience in content marketing, what advice would you give to these fellows?
I would definitely say to look at as much data as you can before you make decisions, but also then go and look at from a human element. There's a lot of us who are incredibly data driven, and that's amazing and very helpful, and a lot of awesome tools and behaviors have come out of that. But you always should end with a human element. And so look at the data first, but then manually go in, look at the pages, look at the content, look at the videos, look at the posts, and see if you're coming up with any red flags there. If you're unsure, send it over to a colleague. When you look at the data and then compare it with a human element, you're more likely to make more sense of the data that's provided to you, because these days there's so much data that you can get that it can definitely be overwhelming on which funnel to take or which process or which strategy to try, because the data said X, Y, and Z this time, but last week it said this. And so always think with the human element and end with the human element.
That's amazing. I think I wouldn't say frustrating, but people that goes into like marketing and content and so on, say, I'm going to work with the content writing and so on. I don't need to look at numbers because I don't like numbers. And all of a sudden they find themselves needing to go for spreadsheets, analyze data. I think going back to the beginning of our chat here, that's how much it changed, isn't it? Before it's just like, write it and yes, publish.
Yes.
Now it's not just about that, is it?
Yep. That's 100% it. Like I used to be able to just write blogs, and I wrote the blogs. I didn't need any other writers. I wrote the blogs. I put up the site. I looked at everything and it was all good. Now you look at the data, you need help writing because there's so much to look at. And I was never a data first person. Data was one of the last things I would look at. I would do what the patterns were, what we were always supposed to do, and look at the data if something was wrong. And now it's like, you need to look at the data first and then figure out what content to produce based on the data.
Amazing. Very good. Very good. Ashley, thank you very much for being here at the show. I hope the audience will like all this knowledge around content, all this experience. We had some great insights here, data, analyze the content with heat maps and so on. So it's been very, very interesting to chat with you, to catch up with you. Hopefully in the near future, things are going back to normal and we can meet at events once again. And yeah.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah, true. And any final words?
No, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I will definitely make sure and share all the resources if anyone needs to get in contact, or if anyone ever has a content question, you can always reach me on Twitter as well at Ashley Hatter.
Great. Thank you very much. And isso foi mais um episódio do Don't Panic, It's Organic com essa incrível profissional Ashley Segura. E até a próxima. Não esqueça de assinar o canal, ativa o sininho para receber as notificações que estamos de volta com as entrevistas. Até a próxima.